From DocuSign, this is Developing with DocuSign. I'm Larry Kluger, member of the DocuSign Dev Center team. In this screencast, I'll show how to install, configure, and use the Node JWT example launcher, and that's repository EG-01-Node-JWT and its examples. First, I'll download and install the JWT example launcher. I'm opening github.com/DocuSign, and then you see the complete URL for the repository. Note the README file for the repository. It also contains information on configuring and using the launcher, similar to what I'm discussing in this screencast. To use the JWT launcher and its example, you'll need a DocuSign integration key that is configured for JWT usage. Integration keys are also referred to as client IDs, since that's the standard OAuth term. For these examples, I'll need the integration key's ID, its private key, and since I'll be using individual consent grant today, the integration key will need to have one of its redirect URI values set to https://www.docusign.com. Please see my screencast on creating an integration key for use with JWT for all the details on how to create the integration key in your account. I have GitHub Desktop installed, so to clone and copy the repo to my development machine, I just click the Open in Desktop button, and then it's downloaded and installed on my machine. The next step for installation is to install the DocuSign SDK and all the other libraries needed by the example project. On my development machine, I cd into the repos directory and then use the npm install command to automatically bring in everything that's needed. Next, I will configure the example launcher with information about the integration key and our default values for signers and CC recipients. The JWT authentication flow returns an access token that enables your application to impersonate a user within your account. Since the user does not need to be present to be impersonated, the JWT flow is considered less secure than the authorization code grant flow and should only be used when a user is not present during normal operation of your application. The JWT flow requires the GUID, not the email address of the person who will be impersonated. I can find the GUID values for the users in my account from the admin tool via the user screen. By clicking on a person's name, the edit user screen is shown, including the user's GUID. I will copy it for use in the configuration file. Next, I open the dsconfig file using a text editor. This file always needs to be present. You can either configure it or set the values by using environment variables. It is preferable to use environment variables since it is important not to store the integration key, private key, or other secret information in your code repository. The example env file.txt in the repository is provided to help you create your own env file for loading environment variable values. And of course, once you've created such a file, don't store it in your repo. For this screencast, I will be setting the values directly in the dsconfig file itself. The example dsconfig file is provided to help you fill in the dsconfig file. I've now set my values in the dsconfig file. It is important to set the private key value without any spaces at the beginning of the lines, as is shown in the example dsconfig file and here as well. Now it's time to use the JWT example launcher to run it. I run the launcher and its two included examples by using the npm start command. You can see that the example launcher has attempted to create an access token via JWT, but received an error response of consent required. This is expected because we've not yet granted consent. We need to grant consent to the integration key for it to impersonate the user. The recommended technique is to use DocuSign Organization Administration to proactively grant consent to the integration key on behalf of all users in the email domain or selected users. In this case, while developing, I'll ask the user who is being impersonated to manually grant permission via a web page. Manually granting consent is a one-time action per user who will be impersonated. Now that consent has been granted, I can rerun the application and view the results. Two sets of results are shown, one from each of the launcher's examples. The first result shows the envelope ID and related information from creating the envelope. The second result shows the output from listing my envelopes and their status. The response from DocuSign included data on all 42 envelopes. The launcher is displaying the response for just the first two. That's it. Please check out additional information for developing with DocuSign at our Dev Center. Thanks very much.